What's going on, my roundtable? My name is Excaliber596, and welcome back to the third official entry in my Just How Strong Is series, where I measure the power of your favorite video game characters through power scaling. Why? Well, I'm a nerd and I like it, so... Fuck you! Now, as many of you may have guessed from the title of the video and the fact that I just used a clip from the game he stars in, today we'll be taking a look at the cocky son of Sparta himself, Dante. By the way, this video will contain spoilers to DMC5, so proceed with caution. So something you need to know about power scaling Devil May Cry characters like Dante is that it can be very tricky to do because many of the characters in the series have what I like to call Saitama syndrome. What I mean by that is that many of the top tiers in Devil May Cry, similar to Saitama from One Punch Man, very rarely go all out in a fight, so it's difficult to say what the cap on their powers really are due to the very nature of DMC's gameplay. See, the focus of the game is to gain style points by stringing together combos and taunting your opponents, implying that the characters are taking out hordes and waves of enemies like it's the easiest thing they've ever done in their lives. It's like these guys graduated from the University of Whoop-Ass with a major in not giving a fuck and a minor in smart-ass one-liners. These guys do this super casually. Another reason for this is based on the fact that despite Dante having stronger forms in the way of devil triggers, it's not usually confirmed that a devil trigger was needed to win the fight he partakes in unless it's shown in cutscenes that he needed to use them. In fact, you can imply that Dante never even uses his devil trigger throughout all of DMC2, and the only reason he used it against Nero in DMC4 was because he underestimated him. So I suppose the best way to get this started is to start with the enemies that he's defeated that have a concrete power level and go off the statements made through descriptions and statements. So going off of Dante's attack potency and durability first, the best place to start with DMC's villains actually comes from a place you might not expect, the anime series. For those of you who don't know, the Devil May Cry anime series is actually confirmed canon to the games and takes place between Devil May Cry 1 and Devil May Cry 2 in the timeline, which means feats from the series can be used to accurately scale Dante and the rest of the cast. The first enemy to talk about here is the demon that Dante fights in the very last episode of the series, a low-level demon that goes by the name of Sid. In the last arc of the series, this snaggletooth little sneak discovers a way to gain the strength of a powerful demon known as Abigail. Yeah, I get it, dumb name for a demon, but that's not the point here. Sid shows what's probably one of the more concrete feats in the series, where he stands atop the highest building in the city and prepares to take over the human realm by creating a demonic summoning circle that spans across an entire continent, while also spamming mouth beams at buildings like a hick with a bucket. Assuming that this circle is an accurate representation of his power, this should put Sid around continent levels with our old pal Dante clashing with him in his base form, only needing a hint of his devil trigger to overcome his attacks. This is pretty consistent with the rest of the timeline, as Abigail was stated to be as powerful as the final bosses of the first two DMC games, the Demon Kings Mundus and Argosax. It also shows a very clear progression in Dante's power throughout the timeline, as Dante needed his Sparta Devil Trigger against Mundus in DMC1, then only needed the regular Devil Trigger against Abigail in the anime, and finally defeated Argosax in base in DMC2, which would put his base around multi-continental levels at this point. This would also mean that by DMC2, Dante should already be more powerful than his father, the legendary Dark Knight Sparta, a demon that is constantly hyped up throughout the series and is known across the world as one of the most powerful demons to ever exist. Like, this dude got his own fucking religion, for crying out loud, and I tell ya, to be more powerful than a demon at the same table as the flying spaghetti monster and football legend Diego Maradona is truly an astonishing feat, to say the least. Also, it basically makes Dante and Virgil Devil Jesus. That doesn't have anything to do with power scaling. I just find that really funny. Speaking of Virgil, I should probably get into his little seppuku temper tantrum that caused the entire plot of DMC5. During the events of DMC4, it was revealed that Virgil was alive, barely, after his battle with Dante as Nilo Angelo in DMC1. He then proceeds to give Nero daddy's belt, yeets his own son out of his arm, takes the dimension-cutting sword Yamato back, and uses it to separate himself into the two halves of his heritage. His human half becomes a demon hunter named V, basically Kylo Ren, but a pet lover that also likes to read and is single, ladies. Swipe right if you're not looking for anything long-term. But anyway, he's not who we're here to talk about. Who we're really here to talk about is Virgil's demonic half known as Urizen. Urizen, in Devil May Cry terms, is a freaking monster. After hooking himself up to what's basically the DMC equivalent to the Tree of Life, Urizen becomes capable of making Dante, the legendary devil hunter, look like he belongs in Weenie Hut Juniors. At least, at first. After Urizen gives him a "No, Daddy, no!" Dante was knocked into an area filled with Qlipoth roots and goes into a coma where he begins to unconsciously absorb the power from the roots, just like Urizen does. Then, after quite a rude awakening from V, Dante then takes up the Devil Sword Sparta and uses the Broken Rebellion to fuse both blades into himself, giving a huge amp to his base, along with access to the new Sin Devil Trigger form and the Devil Sword Dante. Yeah, he names the sword after himself, which sounds egotistical at first, but then you consider the fact that his father did it with the Devil Sword Sparta, and it's actually pretty cool when it happens, so just, leave it at that. Dante then goes on to not only beat Urizen, but a Urizen that later eats the condensed blood fruit of the Qlipoth, which was described in Nico's notes to be the same fruit that allowed Mundus to take over the entire underworld. This caused Urizen's power to spike, to a point where Nico's note stated that he had the power to shake the foundations of the world, and that only godlike power would be able to defeat him, and Dante was able to take him on without either of his Devil Trigger states, giving Dante's base moon to possibly small planetary ranges of power depending on whether or not Nico was describing Urizen's base power or his full strength. It's even possible for him to be higher if you consider the idea that he could be shaking both the human and demon realms at once. Of course, his offensive and defensive stats increase with the use of Devil Triggers. Now, I have no idea what the exact multiplier is for the Devil Trigger state, but I've heard that an interview confirms it to be double? Now, I haven't been able to find said interview, but the multiplier seems pretty consistent with what's been shown, and we have no statements on any concrete destructive capacity increase in either his or any character files across the series, so I'm gonna roll with it for now. If we lowball Urizen's planet-shaking statement to be one planet rather than both the demon realm and the human realm, the minimum amount of force needed to shake the planet is around 20.8 pentatons of TNT, which is a multi-continental feat. Doubling this force would put the Devil Trigger state at 41.6 pentatons, which would put Devil Trigger Dante around high multi-continental to planet levels depending on where you believe he should be. And then comes the Sin Devil Trigger state. Due to the fact that the power of many Devil Trigger states depend on what weapon is being held, the fact that the Sparta Devil Trigger is more powerful than the normal ones, and the fact that the Sin Devil Trigger is a fusion on the Rebellion and the Sparta, my guess is that the Sin Devil Trigger multiplier is basically what would happen if Dante's first Devil Trigger state used a Sparta Devil Trigger, meaning it would likely be another 4 times increase or an 8 times increase to his base. This would put Dante's attack potency at around 166.4 pentatons of TNT, or around low moon levels to multi-planet levels, once again depending on where you stand with the Urizen statement. Now, I know a lot of people are gonna come at me with, but Hideki Kamiya said Mundus created the universe, so Dante's universal in base, idiot. But the problem with that statement is that it's a wild outlier with absolutely nothing else in the series that supports it. Neither Sid nor Argosac show anything close to this feat, and they're stated to be equals to Mundus. Sid is actually shown to have very clear limits, as his portal doesn't continue to expand across the globe, meaning that that is the limit to his power in that regard. What most likely happened is that Mundus created a pocket dimension for them to fight in, which doesn't automatically equate to universal. It's basically for dramatic effect and nothing else. Now, something I've yet to talk about is Dante's speed, simply because it's the most concrete and easiest thing to show out of all of this. Throughout the descriptions of many of the abilities in every Devil May Cry game, you'll see that Dante is consistently a lightning timer throughout all of his forms. It's in the description of his Balrog weapon in DMC5, to his many lightning elemental weapons, and even in one of his Sin Devil Trigger abilities. There's nothing in the series that contradicts this either. Many of the slow motion shots in the series can be calculated to be lightning level, and many bosses use actual lightning to attack, which basically nails Dante's speed at these levels. But there are ways that his speed can go beyond this using styles that I will explain later. And of course you can't talk about Dante without at least mentioning the abilities and weapons that he just loves to show off. Starting off with his melee weapons, he has the standard gauntlets like Beowulf and Gilgamesh, the exploding blades of Lucifer, fire weapons like Balrog and Ifrit, lightning weapons like Alistair and Nevin, and if he wants to use more than one element, he's got his fire and wind swords Agni and Rudra, as well as his triple-changing King Cerberus to cover fire, ice, and lightning all at once. Then, of course, there's my personal favorite, the Cavalier, a freaking motorcycle that transforms into dual saw blades? Vroom vroom, motherfucker! Moving on to his long-range weaponry, Dante is practically a walking military base with his Artemis bowgun, Coyote A shotgun, submachine guns, a grenade launcher, a needle gun, the Nightmare laser gun, the Spiral sniper rifle, the 666 weapons inside the Pandora suitcase, the Catalina and 2 rocket launcher, and dual-wielded Catalina 1 if you want to include it, but I assume he gave them back to Lady. And who can forget Dr. Faust? The cowboy hat with a solid blood-shooting scarf that shows us just how much emphasis he puts in turning style into a weapon. And even after all that, Dante still has his current bread and butter weapons, including Ebony and Ivory, a pair of indestructible dual pistols, one for power and one for accuracy, and the Devil Sword Dante, the fusion of his Rebellion and his father's sword Sparta, a much more powerful sword giving him access to multiple summoned blades he can use for both offensive and defensive purposes. There's also one other weapon I feel I should talk about before moving on to his styles, that being his brother's sword, the Yamato. Now, I don't really like the idea of Dante using the Yamato in versus battles simply because he doesn't have it anymore, considering he gave it to Nero in DMC4, but if you want to use it in some kind of canonical composite Dante, it's definitely worth mentioning, as it's easily the haxiest weapon he has ever had the pleasure of using. It's a katana that has the ability to cut through dimensions, meaning it completely bypasses durability. Like, you could have the strongest shield and the strongest armor made of the strongest metal ever created with the most durable skin ever created, and it wouldn't matter, because the Yamato can still kill you relatively easily using this ability. Once again, I don't like using it in versus battles with them, but I feel like DMC fans would tear me a new one if I didn't at least mention it, so there you go. Now, moving on to his styles, Dante has mastered plenty of different fighting styles over the years that he can swap between to take on different enemies. The main one he tends to use are the Swordmaster and Gunslinger styles, which he uses to increase the effectiveness of his close and long-range weapons respectively. But he also has a few special ones that give him some extra bonuses. Two of his other basic styles include the Trickster style, which focuses on dodging and attacking with quick bursts of speed, and the Royal Guard style that focuses on tanking enemy hits and releasing the damage back out in an absolutely devastating attack. However, there are two more special styles in DMC3 that are definitely worth mentioning that make Dante a much more dangerous fighter. The first one is the Doppelganger style, where he creates a temporary clone of himself to team up with. Pretty self-explanatory, but absolutely monstrous with someone as fast and as powerful as Dante is, as now his opponent would be forced to face off against two Dantes, smartassing them into oblivion. The second one, known as the Quicksilver style, actually has a bit of weirdness surrounding how it works. Due to the fact that the entire area slows down as he uses the style, it's easy to assume that this means he's controlling time and slowing down his enemy's movements as a result. But if you look in the style files in DMC3, it states that Quicksilver has a time-controlling style which the player can move at lightning-quick speeds. This means that it's possible for him to simply be increasing his own speed to the point where everything around him appears slow, or that he actually is slowing his opponents down so that from their perspective, he's moving at lightning speeds. Either way, it's a technique that's basically a massive speed amp in comparison to his Trickster style. Dante also has a couple of other different abilities that don't fall under his styles, but are more likely to come from his demonic heritage. Of course, he has superhuman strength, durability, and speed, but he also has some very substantial regen, where he can usually just shrug off most attacks. Now, I don't think he can necessarily survive getting his body parts chopped off, but it still allows him to have a good reason to be as reckless as he is. He also has the ability to teleport, use telekinesis, double jump, a possible level of soul manipulation from the anime series, and the ability to imbue demonic energy into his weapons to give them a power boost, one of which he uses to give us the most epic finisher ever.
Jackpot.
In conclusion, Dante is an extremely capable moon-to-planet level fighter. He uses his smart aleck quips and attitude to enrage his opponents so that he can catch them somewhat off guard and overwhelm them with his multitude of weapons and styles. His main focus is on his speed and power, and will usually attack with reckless abandon as his regen allows him to take most hits with little issue. But he will act defensively if the need arises, and despite his carefree attitude, will fight seriously if he finds someone he feels will be a challenge, in which case his Devil Trigger and Sin Devil Trigger trigger forms will be more than enough to get the advantage back in most cases. However, Dante can't stay in his double trigger states for very long, and his healing ability tends to be less efficient as his stamina is drained, meaning that drawn out fights with characters stronger than him will more than likely bring him some trouble. And of course, being half demon, while it definitely has its perks, could possibly mean a lot of trouble for Dante if he goes up against any holy weaponry, as it could neg his regen and make him much easier to kill. That will be about all for today's video. Let me know in the comments if there's anything I might have missed, or just your opinions on the Devil May Cry series as a whole. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but I'm still gonna try and get videos out faster for you guys, and I actually have a few projects planned that I'm already working on, including my first death battle video between Dante and Link, so look forward to that. Some top 10s including the Duck Girl herself, and some power scaling and versus battle videos in their wake. If you like this video and want to see more like it, give it a like, a share, and a subscribe, and I will call you guys for the next council. Later.